Digital radio is the use of digital technology to transmit or receive across the radio spectrum. Digital transmission by radio waves includes digital broadcasting, and especially digital audio radio services. In digital broadcasting systems, the analog audio signal is digitized, compressed using an audio coding format such as AAC+, MDCT, or MP2, and transmitted using a digital modulation scheme. The aim is to increase the number of radio programs in a given spectrum, to improve the audio quality, to eliminate fading problems in mobile environments, to allow additional datacasting services, and to decrease the transmission power or the number of transmitters required to cover a region. However, analog radio, AM and FM, is still more popular, and listening to radio over IP, Internet Protocol, is growing in popularity. In 2012, 4 digital wireless radio systems are recognized by the International Telecommunication Union, the 2 European systems Digital Audio Broadcasting, DAB, and Digital Radio Mondiale, DRM, the Japanese ISDBT, and the in-band on-channel technique used in the US and Arab world and branded as HD radio. An older definition, still used in communication engineering literature, is wireless digital transmission technologies, i.e. microwave and radio frequency communication standards, where analog information signals as well as digital data are carried by a digital signal, by means of a digital modulation method. This definition includes broadcasting systems such as digital TV and digital radio broadcasting, but also two-way digital radio standards such as the second generation, 2G, cell phones, and later, short-range communication such as digital cordless phones, wireless computer networks, digital microwave radio links, deep space communication systems such as communications to and from the 2 Voyager space probes, etc. A less common definition is radio receiver and transmitter implementations that are based on digital signal processing, but may transmit or receive analog radio transmission standards, for example FM radio. This may reduce noise and distortion induced in the electronics. It also allows software radio implementations, where the transmission technology is changed just by selecting another piece of software. In most cases, this would however increase the energy consumption of the receiver equipment. Digital audio radio service standards may provide terrestrial or satellite radio service. Digital radio broadcasting systems are typically designed for handheld mobile devices, like mobile TV systems, and unlike other digital TV systems which typically require a fixed directional antenna. Some digital radio systems provide in-band on-channel, IBOC, solutions that may coexist with or simulcast with analog AM or FM transmissions, while others are designed for designated radio frequency bands. The latter allows one wideband radio signal to carry a multiplex of several radio channels of various bit rates as well as data services and other forms of media. Some digital broadcasting systems allow single frequency network, SFN, where all terrestrial transmitters in a region sending the same multiplex of radio programs may use the same frequency channel without self-interference problems, further improving the system's spectral efficiency. While digital broadcasting offers many potential benefits, its introduction has been hindered by a lack of global agreement on standards and many disadvantages. The DAB Eureka 147 standard for digital radio is coordinated by the World DMB Forum. This standard of digital radio technology was defined in the late 1980s, and is now being introduced in some European countries. Commercial DAB receivers began to be sold in 1999 and, by 2006, 500 million people were in the coverage area of DAB broadcasts, although by this time sales had only taken off in the UK and Denmark. In 2006 there are approximately 1,000 DAB stations in operation. There have been criticisms of the Eureka 147 standard, and so a new DAB Plus standard has been introduced. The DRM standard has been used for several years to broadcast digitally on frequencies below 30 MHz, shortwave, medium wave, and long wave. Also there is now the extended standard DRM Plus, which is designed for VHF bands. Tests of DRM Plus has been made in countries such as in Brazil, Germany, France, India, Sri Lanka, the UK, Slovakia, Italy, including the Vatican, as well as Sweden. DRM Plus is regarded as a more transparent and less costly standard than DAB Plus and thus a better choice for local radio, commercial or community broadcasters. Although DAB Plus has been introduced in Australia, the government concluded in 2011 that a preference for DRM and DRM Plus above HD radio could be used to supplement DAB Plus services in some local and regional areas. A radio format or programming format, not to be confused with broadcast programming, describes the overall content broadcast on a radio station. The radio format emerged mainly in the United States in the 1950s, at a time when radio was compelled to develop new and exclusive ways to programming by competition with television. The formula has since spread as a reference for commercial radio programming worldwide. A radio format aims to reach a more or less specific audience according to a certain type of programming, which can be thematic or general, more informative or more musical, among other possibilities. Radio formats are often used as a marketing tool and are subject to frequent changes. Except for talk radio or sports radio formats, most programming formats are based on commercial music. However, the term also includes the news, bulletins, DJ talk, jingles, commercials, competitions, traffic news, sports, weather and community announcements between the tracks. Even before World War II, radio stations in North America and Europe almost always adopted a generalist radio format. However, the United States witnessed the growing strengthening of television over the radio as the major mass media in the country by the late 1940s. American television had more financial resources to produce generalist programs that provoked the migration of countless talents from radio networks to the new medium. Under this context, the radio was pressured to seek alternatives to maintain its audience and cultural relevance. As a consequence, AM radio stations began to emerge in the United States and Canada, many of which independents, that is not affiliated with the network, developed a format which targeted audiences with programming consisted of music, news, charismatic disc jockeys to directly attract a certain audience. For example, by the 1960s, the easy listening obtained a stable position on FM radio, a spectrum considered ideal for good music and high-fidelity listening as it grew in popularity during that period, and the middle of the road, more, rose as a radio industry term to discern radio stations that played mainstream pop songs from radio stations whose programming was geared towards teenagers and was dominated by rock and roll, the most popular musical genre of the period in the United States, and which held the first successful radio format called Top 40. In reality, the Top 40 format was conscientiously prepared to attract the young audience, who was the main consumer of the records sold by the American record industry at that time. Soon, playlists became central to programming and radio formats, although the number of records in a playlist really depends on the format. By the mid-1960s, American FM radio's penetration began achieving balance with AM radio since the Federal Communications Commission required that co-owned AM and FM stations be programmed independently from each other. This resulted in huge competition between radio stations in the AM and FM spectrum to differentiate themselves for both audiences and advertisers. At that time, it proliferated many radio formats, which included presentation, schedule, and target audience, as well as repertoire. Within a few years, FM radio stations were supplying program formats completely analogous to their AM stations' counterparts, increased to more than 50% in 1970 and reached 95% in 1980. During the 1970s and 1980s, radio programming formats expanded into commercially successful variations, for example, adult contemporary, AC, album-oriented rock, hour, and urban contemporary, UC, among others, which spread to most AM and FM radio stations in the United States. Over time, FM radio came to dominate music programming, while AM radio switched to news and talk formats. In some countries such as the UK, licenses to broadcast on radio frequencies are regulated by the government, and may take account of social and cultural factors including format type, local content, and language, as well as the price available to pay for the spectrum use. This may be done to ensure a balance of available public content in each area, and in particular to enable non-profit local community radio to exist alongside larger and richer national companies. On occasions, format regulation may lead to difficult legal challenges when government accuses a station of changing its format, for example arguing in court over whether a particular song or group of songs is pop or rock. In a world filled with mobile phones, tablets and computers, people often ask us, why radio? The answer is simply that radio still has the widest audience footprint, reaching millions who have no access to the internet. Radio's power to educate and inform in everyday life and in emergencies is just as important today as it has always been, and possibly even more so today. Radio proved to be invaluable during the COVID-19 pandemic. Learners around the world tuned into radio stations to receive academic tuition via the airwaves. Messages on how to prevent the spread of infection saved countless lives. Radio remains the most used mass communication medium in Africa. It has the widest geographical reach and the greatest audiences compared with the internet, television, and newspapers. Who needs a phone package when you have radio? Radio is free. Always and forever. This is an important consideration during pandemics, where lockdowns prevent people going out to earn a living that would pay for data services. It reaches rich and poor alike. Educated, uneducated, young, old. Every tribe, every region, each gender and race. Programs are broadcast in local languages, whether it's nutrition information for mothers, medical updates for health workers, how to avoid a viral infection during an outbreak, conservation farming for farmers, or school lessons for children. Africans trust news and information on the BBC World Service, for example, as well as local and community radio stations. People often refer to the voices on the radio as their friends. People turn to radio first when disaster strikes. Survivors need to find lost loved ones, access food, shelter, or medical aid. It provides psychosocial support to those traumatized. During pandemics, radio reaches far and wide with life-saving information and is a calm voice for all to hear. Information is aid. People can listen to radio anytime, anywhere. You don't need to be plugged into the electrical grid to do so. Radio sets are more affordable than other forms of tech and cost less to power. The cost of producing radio shows is low in comparison to creating TV and other visual content. Radio is a social medium, fostering participation and engagement in people's own home languages. Even if social distancing measures are in place, individuals can engage in meaningful community participation by calling into the radio station to have their say, while also listening to fellow community members. Radio goes where newer technologies can't. Beyond electricity, beyond a mobile signal. Beyond literacy. It's the most effective way of delivering information in remote corners where having the right knowledge can mean the difference between a harvest and hunger, between feeling confident or humiliated, or even between life and death. Lifeline Energy have added enhanced functionality to the traditional radio by adding MP3 playback to many of our products. This means that radio programs can be recorded and not be lost to listeners after being aired. Audio content can also be loaded onto the players for on-demand listening. There's no question about it, radio just gets more valuable and efficient over time. Thank you for watching this video.